Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran on the NYPD. This really is Police Off the Cuff. We have a new virtual background. I hope you like it. Anyway, folks, a lot going on as far as the court hearings in regards to the Idaho 4 case. And Ann Taylor, this has been brought up before, obviously. She's raising a new defense for Brian Kohberger, the alternate suspect defense. But Judge Hippler is absolutely no fool whatsoever. So at this late date, where it's very close to the jury being chosen, will this defense be allowed? Judge Hippler does not have to allow this defense. Ann Taylor will present it, and the judge will determine whether or not it's viable or whether it passes mustard. After Brian Kohbergers' defense attempted to offer an alternate perpetrator's theory into his trial, the case's presiding judge called for more evidence before he deems the theory admissible. As part of the trial preparation for the suspect in the 2022 University of Idaho murders, Kohberger's attorneys offered an alternate perpetrator's theory during a May 15th hearing, suggesting one or more people other than Kohberger killed Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Zana Knodel in their off-campus home. The judge, Stephen Hippler, immediately sealed the file and called upon the defense team to offer up more evidence to support the theory, according to court footage that was shared by NBC News. It seemed to be much of what you put in there, Hippler said in court, was potentially fairly objectionable in terms of admissibility. According to the outlet, an additional hearing will be held in June to determine whether the alleged perpetrator theory can be brought into trial. As Judge Hippler added, provide me with whatever actual evidence you have that supports these allegations rather than just allegations. So, again, this judge is no fool. He's not going to just let them present an alleged alternate perpetrator theory unless they have evidence, real evidence that suggests that this is real. So we're going to get into this a little bit, folks. So hold on to your hats. Hold on to your loved ones. Hold on to your service dog. Hold on to your cup of coffee. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone. The police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing, and we're into the NBA and NHL playoffs, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. With the largest selection of odds on everything from Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and UFC, BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. So, a lot of things happening, right? And of course, this decision by Ann Taylor, which was raised earlier on, of whether it be allowed an alternate suspect theory. This comes on the heels of the leaks in this case. Who leaked all of this information to Dateline NBC, right? And that show that went out on national television on a Friday night really pissed off this judge, Judge Hippler. And the other question is, who released this? And what type of action can this judge take in order to punish? He's talking about appointing a special prosecutor to prosecute the person or persons who leaked this stuff. Some really important information went in there. Information that now everyone knows, like the videotape of the white Elantra. That someone having access to that lets us know that this is a person or persons that had their finger on the pulse of this case. So this judge is livid, and he intends to appoint a special prosecutor. And if they find out who did this, to prosecute this person. This is from Fox News.
A tip that points to an alternative suspect, and they submitted subpoena documents to support that claim. But the judge said today that he still has questions.
It seemed to me much of what you had put in there was fairly potentially fairly objectionable in terms of admissibility.
Travel. Judge Hippler is giving the defense until next month to provide more details. Kohbergers sat quietly in court today wearing a white shirt and tie. He's facing 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary, accused of stabbing 4 University of Idaho students in their off-campus home more than 2 years ago. The judge also ruled on how much of the trial will be shown publicly, allowing a live stream but banning close-ups and juror faces. 12 jurors and 8 alternates will be seated. The jury will not be sequestered during the trial, but will be during deliberations. The judge approved the use of a model of the crime scene during the trial. Prosecutors apologized after referring to it as a, quote, dollhouse, a term the defense said was insensitive and potentially misleading. A judge told both sides to use the term model house going forward. And we also learned today that during the trial, 2 seats will be reserved for the 2 surviving roommates. That is, if they choose to attend. The trial is slated to begin in August and could last several months. If convicted, Kohberger is facing the death penalty. Andrew.
Kennedy, just a few questions. Were any family members or friends of the victims inside this hearing today? Do we know?
So some of the things, the questions that we have, obviously, is the judge going to allow this alternate suspect defense raised by Ann Taylor? You heard him talk right here. Will this be admissible or will this be inadmissible? Because it's a late hour, and unless they have real solid information. After all, Brian Kohberger's DNA is on the knife sheath found in the bed next to Madison Mogen. Now, what evidence do you have that the alternate suspect, in fact, did he work in concert with Brian Kohberger? Or are you claiming that Brian Kohberger had absolutely nothing to do with this? And Taylor, that's where I have some problems here. And that's where I think the judge will determine whether or not this will be admissible, because at the last hour, coming up with this alternate suspect, I think it's very suspect. I think that beyond prejudicial. So this judge will make a decision whether or not the jury ever sees that. In essence, this judge will determine, no, this is not admissible, I'm not allowing it, or yes, I'll let this in with certain caveats. And I don't know. I don't see that. At this late hour, I can't imagine what Ann Taylor will come across with in regards to an alternate suspect that is going to pass the smell test for Judge Hippler. It's just, it's not, to me, it's not believable What real does she have? Physical evidence? Does she have forensic evidence? Does she have testimonial evidence? Is there videotaped evidence? Is there documents? Is there digital evidence against this alternate suspect? What is the evidence? That's what Judge Hippler is asking. And that's what we, as people covering and people following this case, we want to know. What evidence do you have that brings this alternate suspect into this case? And how is it believable? This is from Fox News.
Trial, giving the defense one last chance to try to convince him to allow them to present an alternate perpetrator theory to the jury.
Receive the defense's proffer regarding alternate perpetrators. That will be sealed. Provide me with whatever actual evidence you have that supports those allegations, rather than just allegations.
Let's bring in Anjanette Levy. She is a host of the Law and Crime Network. When you hear the judge, Anjanette, say, bring me the evidence, it sounds like the proffer didn't include a lot of actual evidence. It just sort of maybe put forward some theories or something.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like that, John, and thanks so much for having me. The judge has been pretty clear that they're going to have to meet certain guidelines for him to allow this alternate perpetrator theory in. The defense has already indicated that they're going to go with a theory that there were 2 killers and 2 weapons involved. They have an expert who's going to testify for them that there were 2 weapons involved in these crimes because the injuries to the 4 victims in the case were different and caused possibly by 2 different weapons. So it will be interesting to see what they ultimately present. As you heard, the judge said these things are under seal right now, so we don't know who they're offering up as these alternate suspects, but there is case law in Idaho that says they have to meet a certain standard in order to present this evidence to the jury.
But the key to the case, the thing that really led to the arrest of Brian Kohberger, is DNA that was found on the knife sheath inside the home, and the authorities say it's Brian Kohberger's DNA. So even if there was somebody else involved, it would seem that the case against Kohberger is pretty strong.
It does seem like a very strong piece of evidence, and we don't know how exactly the defense is going to attack that. It is Kohberger's DNA on the knife sheath, but
So one of the things that I would suspect they could do is, they could have Brian Kohberger. Well, he won't even be allowed to testify. Well, so strike that. But he'd almost have to admit that this person worked with him or that he was acting in concert with him. Or else this doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. Because there is a ton of circumstantial evidence against Brian Kohberger. So how does the defense now at the 11th hour come up with this defense that we have an alternate suspect? And Judge Hippler, not being a fool, okay, present it to me, but bring forth evidence. Don't just say, because first of all, if they're going to present that, and if do they have a name? Do they have a name of a potential suspect? Or is this just hearsay? Or is this just people, unnamed witnesses that potentially aren't even witnesses? And the other thing is about an expert who's going to say that the 4 victims were killed with different weapons. First of all, the pathologist who performs the autopsy, he or she, in performing that autopsy, would, in his or her report, say that all of these injuries are consistent with the same weapon or not. But for them, now the defense, to bring in this expert that's going to say, oh, there was more than one weapon. I mean, that's very difficult to determine, but we've seen other court cases other high-profile trials where you can have an extremely competent pathologist that performs the autopsies, and then some retired pathologist comes in and says 180 degrees different than the pathologist who conducted the autopsy says. And that's the nature of expert witnesses testifying in a court of law. They can testify 180 degrees by the expert who is testifying for the state.
They've suggested that it could have been transferred onto that knife sheath by somebody else. And they've always said in these pretrial hearings, how did that knife sheath get there? So it will be interesting to see how the defense explains Brian Kohberger's DNA being on the inner snap of that knife sheath. I actually have one of those sheaths here in my office. I could show it to you in just a second, but it's on the inner snap of that knife sheath. They didn't test the top of the knife sheath button. They tested the inner snap. And that is where the DNA was found. Plus, they have those Amazon records, John, that show that Brian Kohberger, or at least somebody in his family, they're suggesting possibly somebody in his family could have purchased the knife sheath, bought that knife sheath and sharpener and knife in March of 2022, months and months before the homicides.
Meantime, there is this huge controversy roiling the case about evidence that NBC Dateline was able to put on air. They have actual footage of what they say is Kohberger's car circling the crime scene on the night of the killings and then racing away from the killings. There are some other very incriminating pieces of evidence, and all of that stuff was supposed to be under seal. Here's some of it. Kohberger's AT&T phone records, the content of his cell phone, photos and information associated with his Amazon account. And again, at the top there, the surveillance footage of what police say was his car. The judge is not happy about this.
No, the judge is absolutely furious, and he didn't show a lot of emotion during that hearing the other day, but he's furious, and he wants a special prosecutor appointed to investigate the source or the source of this leak, or he wants the leaker or leakers. It could be more than one person leaking this information, because this is information that only law enforcement or the prosecutors would have been privy to. They had actual information from Brian Kohberger's phone. They had photographs, selfies of him, his Google searches. They had his Amazon records, some of which we knew about from pretrial motions. But really, they had insider information. And they even said that in an interview that Keith Morrison did with a reporter. They said that, they had the goods, and they felt like they had a lot of the evidence that would be presented at trial. So they got it from an inside source. And the judge said in the order that he presented to the prosecution, ordering them to preserve all communications and records, that he suspected it was likely a member of the prosecution team, a former member of the prosecution team, a member of law enforcement, or maybe a former member of law enforcement.
This makes a lot of sense that it's coming from the prosecution side and not the defense. Now, people will ask, well, what does the prosecution have to benefit by releasing? Nothing. And I'm sure that it wasn't Bill Thompson. It was probably someone from law enforcement that thought that they could sneakily give this information to Dateline NBC. And how does it doesn't help. It hurts. It hurts. But this occurs all the time. This isn't a one-time. Law enforcement sometimes leaks information to the press. And for what purpose? Well, in this case, it will definitely hurt the case, but I think they'll get by. It's not going to throw out any of this evidence. None of the evidence is going to be thrown out because it was brought towards the public prior to the trial. What they have to be very concerned with, of course, is getting a jury that they can seat a jury of 12 jurors that will be the actual live jurors in the courtroom, and then 8 alternates that in case a juror becomes sick or is disqualified for some reason, they have 8 alternate jurors that are also hearing the case, but they don't have a vote on the case unless one of the 12 original jurors, for some reason, is taken off the case, sickness, disqualification for some reason or another. So I don't think, many people, I've seen some content creators out there saying, oh, this could really damage the case. I don't think it will. I don't think it's going to damage the judge. Has to show his disdain for what occurred. It's his courtroom. He's the one in charge, and I wouldn't want that either. So Judge Hippler, yes, of course, he's furious over the leaks. Can they find out from Dateline NBC who their source was? There's no way any broadcast agency is going to tell you who their source was for a story like this, especially since there was one TV station, Dateline NBC, one show that had this blockbuster information. They will never, ever give up their information.
So he suspects this leak came from the state side of things, not the defense.
Whoever released that evidence probably thought they were helping buttress the case against Brian Kohberger, but could result in.
That's not the reason. Whoever released it didn't think it was going to help the case. That's ridiculous. What they thought, they were just being friendly or perhaps securing a connection with someone from Dateline NBC by releasing this information. It happens all the time. I don't think anyone from the law enforcement side would think that by releasing this information, it would help the case. It's quite the opposite, to tell you the truth.
Suppression of some of that evidence, some of it being thrown out of the case. We'll see.
That is very possible, and it could. And the judge said it could make it much harder to seat a jury, and he may have to end up sequestering the jury.
All right, and Jeanette Levy, it's good to talk to you. Thank you.
So I don't see Judge Hippler throwing out any of this evidence. I don't see right now. They don't even know who leaked this information. And that is, of course, the judge says he's going to appoint a special prosecutor to find that out. This was from the Today Show. This shows you one of the pieces of evidence that was leaked. And of course, that was the video of Brian Kohberger's, his alleged vehicle driving by 1122 King Road on the morning of the murders. Here it is right here.
That's video footage of suspect vehicle 1 circling the King Road neighborhood minutes before 4 University of Idaho students were murdered. And a new report by Dateline reveals Brian Kohberger's Google searches about pornography, serial killer Ted Bundy, and the possible intended target that morning. I go through the new information. I'm Jeanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Now, all I can say is wow about this new information that has been revealed by Dateline about the Brian Kohberger case. Jury selection in Kohberger's death penalty case is scheduled to begin on July 30th. That's less than 3 months from now, and it's not that far off. With the trial that close, this trove of new information has come out, and it was aired, as I mentioned, on an episode of Dateline. It revealed Kohberger's Google searches for pornography, selfies he took of himself wearing all black, including hoodies, and searching several times over 3 months before and after the murders for serial killer Ted Bundy. Now, prosecutors could possibly use the searches for pornography about a woman being passed out to point to a possible motive. Dateline also revealed who investigators believed was the intended target that morning and the order in which the 4 students were killed. We'll talk more about that in a bit.
So amazing amount of information. Yes, this doesn't help the case. This absolutely hurts the case. So when we think about the defense versus the prosecution, I think it's clear that Judge Hippler believes that this leak came from the prosecutorial side. And this was on the heels of Judge Hippler making all kinds of decisions that seemingly helped the prosecution. And we see in this thumbnail up on the screen, disturbing Google searches, new revelations in Idaho killings. And of course, we find out some of the searches that Brian Kohberger was making, the Ted Bundy searches, the pornographic searches, things that sort of pointed toward a potential motive. And also Brian Kohberger's state of mind. All of this, again, I will repeat, is circumstantial evidence. And this doesn't mean that he did this, right? It's a little piece of evidence. And of course, the picture you see up on the screen, Brian Kohberger with the selfie at 10:31 hours on November 13th, 2022, the morning of those murders. So that is also a little bit creepy, pointing toward his state of mind, or whether in fact that picture there was almost like a trophy that killers sometimes save to relive at a later time their handiwork. And these spooky pictures of Brian Kohberger with a hoodie also found on his phone. And the fact that he had ordered the balaclava, they have that on his Amazon searches. Again, none of this in itself is smoking gun evidence or says that he is the guy who committed these 4 murders. But circumstantial evidence piling up. When a jury hears about this circumstantial evidence, they have a lot to consider, right? And of course, the defense pushing the alternate suspect. And we'll find out very soon whether Judge Hippler will allow that, or will he say, no, I'm not allowing that evidence in. It's not evidence. It's conjecture. It's hearsay. He may do that, but he is absolutely going to listen to the defense and their presentation in regards to what evidence do you have that this alternate suspect is a viable suspect? And that in itself is what will allow Judge Hippler to make the decision to allow the alternate suspect evidence in or not to allow it in at all. Folks, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, share us with your friends and your family, and stay with the Police Off the Cuff family. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. I'm retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.